The candlelight in the Tower of the Hand drew long, thin bars across the flagstones, and Ned Stark stood within them as if behind prison grates. Dawn had only just peeled away the scarlet shreds of night above King's Landing, yet the air already tasted of furnace brick heat and distant smoke from bakers' ovens. Somewhere below, the bells of the Great September told the hour of the Sparrow. Their clangor slipped through arrow slits and tugged at Ned's ribs like anxious fingers. He rested one palm on the pommel of ice, sheathed and leaning against a table littered with inkpots and half-curled raven scrolls, though the steel gave him little comfort. Today's blade was not his. Words sharper than Valyrian steel would be unsheathed in the throne room, and in their edge lay kingdoms. Across the room, Howland Reed adjusted the linen bandages around Ser Arthur Dayne's ribs. The little crannogman's hands moved deftly, stained with tinctures that smelled of pine resin and bog myrtle. Arthur sat shirtless on a stool, light from a candelabrum sliding over the planes of his shoulders, over the pale scars that splayed like frost cracks across his skin. Where shadows gathered beneath his collarbones, they seemed deep enough to sip the flickering flame. Ned had never seen the sword of the morning this gaunt. Yet in Arthur's violet eyes, half-lids lowered, lids tremulous with pain, there still burned an austere resolve, as though Dawn, his famous blade, now glimmered somewhere inside his breast instead of at his hip. "How does it sit?" Howland asked in a murmur that barely crossed the chamber. "Like a Dornish spear in my side," Arthur replied, lips quirking. "But I shall stand." Ned stepped forward, boots thudding against the rushes. "You need not stand, sir. The court will hear you regardless." "The court must see me, Stark," Arthur said, lifting his gaze. "If truth is to bloom where lies have rooted, its gardener must be unbowed." The words stung Ned in a place deeper than duty. His honor, once as clear to him as winter sky, now lay clouded in unspoken oaths and secret newborns swaddled in snowfall. He moved to the window embrasure, pushing aside a heavy velvet curtain. The red keep unfurled below, crimson battlements baking in the early light, the courtyard where gold cloaks drilled, the rookery tower where ravens croaked for offal. Beyond the walls, King's Landing sprawled like a slumbering beast, roofs packed scale-tight, the Blackwater rush glittering at its flank. A wind from the narrow sea carried salt and wrought up the cliffs, tangling with the scent of lemon trees in the higher gardens. It had been 13 days since they rode hard from the red mountains of Dorne. Arthur bound across a horse litter, fevered and bleeding from wounds given by Ned's own companions. Will's arrow, Martin Castle's spear butt, and Ice's flat parry that broke the knight's wrist instead of severing his head. When Dawn first found them dragging through the Prince's Pass, Ned had wondered whether mercy had been folly. Yet every league northward Arthur's breath steadied, and every league his conviction grew. Lyanna's last words must be heard aloud, must be burned into the annals of men before Robert Baratheon's crown could hammer them flat. Ned turned back. On the table lay the parchment itself, folded thrice, wax unbroken. Though he had carried it stitched against his tunic, he had not dared read the ink Lyanna bled across it. He knew only that her quill had flown in the hour between Rhaegar's death on the Trident and her own on the bed of bloodied roses. Arthur had pressed the letter into his hand at the tower's door, voice trembling. "For the realm's sake, Eddard, promise me, promise." The word still scythed at Ned's mind like a reaper. A rap sounded at the door. Fat Tom blundered in, face blotched with the humidity of the ramparts. "My lord," he puffed. "The king has convened the court." "They wait." Ned thanked him with a nod. Howland straightened, wiping tincture on his sleeve. Arthur eased to his feet, every breath a hitch. Dawn lay on the table's far edge, wrapped in a pale doeskin that could not hide its milky sheen. Ned grasped the sword's belt and approached, but Arthur lifted a hand. "I will not bear Dawn until the night is washed clean of blood," he said quietly. "Let it rest, Stark. Words first. Then the sword may find its place." Ned set the blade back, uneasy. He offered a shoulder. Arthur shook his head and looped an arm through Howland's. Together, they stepped into the corridor where sconces spat blue-white torch crackle against vermilion tapestries of Targaryen dragons. Each thread seemed to Ned alive with recent flame, as if the fabric remembered mad King Eyries' pyres. The footfalls of their little procession echoed like drums of a vassal levy mustering, though only 2 gold cloaks paced ahead, clearing servants from stairwells. At every landing, men whispered. Already rumor flew faster than ravens. Stark returns with dead white sword. Stark harbors a secret Dornish bastard. Stark plots rebellion. Ned kept his eyes forward. Through arched windows he caught glimpses of the court filling the throne room. Lords his father once called friend, Southron knights glittering like beetles, Lannister crimson and Baratheon black and gold banners draping galleries. At the dais, Robert himself would lounge on the iron throne, hammer-broad shoulders wrapped in sable, one boot propped on a sword barb. The image struck Ned with a pang of older, easier days. Robert laughing atop a keg at Storm's End, boasting of blue-eyed wenches and tourney glory. But that Robert had died at the Trident with Rhaegar. The man who wore the crown now was harder, hungrier, forged by victory into something edged. They halted before the throne room's bronze doors. The gold cloaks saluted and swung the leaves wide. Sound crashed against Ned like surf. Talk, cough, armor scrape, a hawker's cry from an open window. Above all, the restless shiver of heat under stone vaults. Sunlight lanced through high windows, painting the hall in bars like a giant's cage. And at its center, upon forged swords fused by dragonfire, sat Robert Baratheon. The king's beard bristled around a mug yet half full of dark ale. Though his black doublet strained at the seams, his eyes were alert, blue as crack ice. At his shoulder perched Grand Maester Pycelle, head bowed. To Robert's right stood Lord Tywin Lannister, golden head held high, face carved from grudging marble. Cersei lounged nearby, green eyes slitted. And below, on marble steps, stood a hush, men and women of every region waiting for whatever spectacle Ned Stark had brought out of the desert. He felt their gazes slide over Arthur Dayne like knives searching for purchase. Many recognized him at once. White cloak now stained rust, hair silver pale, and those haunting violet eyes that had once filled the lists with awe. A murmur rippled, Kingsguard, traitor, ghost. Robert's brow knotted. Ale sloshed as he set the mug aside. Eddard! The king boomed, voice filling the rafters. 7 hells, they said you came back with a corpse fastened to your horse. But it seems the bastard still sucks air. Arthur inclined his head, neither yielding nor challenging. Ned stepped forward and bowed stiffly. Your Grace, I beg audience. You have it. Robert leaned forward. Explain why the traitor who shielded Rhaegar's whelp still lives, when my wrath prefers graves. A hush deepened. Ned's mouth dried. He could smell pitch on torches, oil in crevices. The heat pressed like a smith's palm on his nape. He drew from his belt the folded parchment, holding it as one might cradle a hatchling. Because before she died, he said, voice pitched not to carry yet every ear strained forward, Lyanna Stark placed her final words in this night's keeping. Those words concern crowns and graves alike. They belong not to one man's vengeance, but to the realm. Robert's cheeks reddened beneath his beard. Lyanna is dead. I need no ghostly whisper to tell me why. Rhaegar stole her, and we avenged her. Your sister rests. She does not rest, Howland Reed said, stepping past Ned, voice reed slender yet clear. Her memory is torn on the tongues of singers, made into lies. Her shade walks behind her brother until truth is spoken. The court shifted. Few recognized Howland, a short, smoky-eyed man in green attire, leather jerkin traced with bog leaf patterns. But his certainty unnerved them more than a knight's threat. Robert's gaze flicked to Arthur. So, White Sword, do you claim to speak for Rhaegar's captive? Arthur's chest rose as if tasting the full pain of air before speech. He moved, slow as dawn creeping across hills, until he stood at the hall's center. When he spoke, his tone cut neat, soft, and lethal. I speak for a princess of the north who was no man's captive. I speak for vows kept and broken, for the honor of the Kingsguard, and for the life of a child hidden behind sorrow. And I speak through her own hand. He held out his palm. Ned placed Lyanna's letter upon it. The wax glimmered crimson. Robert snarled. "No more riddles. Read." Pycelle shuffled forward. "Your Grace, perhaps we might—" "Silence." The king's voice cracked like a tulwar striking iron. "Let him wet his tongue on treason. Then we shall see whose head parts company with shoulders." Arthur lifted the parchment. His fingers trembled only once, then stilled. With care, he broke the wax and unfolded the letter. The hall breathed as a single creature. Light glinted on the curve of his cheekbone. Ned felt memory flood him. Lyanna's laugh chasing riders across Winterfell's green, snow settling on fur, her fierce joy at winning a race against Benjen, the scent of crushed blue winter roses. Arthur began, "To my brother Eddard, and to the realm that calls my honor into question." He read, voice clear enough that even the backbenches heard. "Know that I went south of my own will to ride with Prince Rhaegar, whose heart beat with music and quiet purpose. We wed in the sight of the old gods and the new, and the crown set upon my brow was not stolen but freely given." Gasps scurried through the nobility like rats. Tywin's brows pinched. Cersei's lips parted. Robert sat stunned, big hands clenching the throne's arms until blood drained from the knuckles. Arthur continued, unfaltering, "I carry our child in my womb. Should I die before dawn finds me, let no man call him bastard nor traitor. Let the North remember my laughter, not the lies others will weave. Let Eddard guard him, and let a sword of mourning protect the truth until snowdrops bloom in spring." Ned sagged as if struck. The words were fewer than he had feared, but each reverberated deeper than the next chiming of the September spells. Arthur read the rest, naming the witnesses: Lord Commander Gerald Hightower, Ser Oswell Went, and Ser Arthur Dayne, and sealing the letter with the sigil of House Stark drawn in Rhaegar's hand. When the last syllable faded, silence suffocated the throne room. Arthur lowered the parchment, waiting. Robert Baratheon's face changed shade by shade, from deathly white to blotched crimson to the purple flush of restrained rage. The Iron Throne seemed small beneath him. Its twisted swords pointed toward his heart, as though longing to finish a task long delayed. "It is forgery," the king said at last, voice scraping. "A lie penned by this snake to save his hide." Ned took a single step forward, ignoring the swords that angled to bar his way. "I know my sister's hand, Robert. I know her turns of phrase, her flourishes. This is Lyanna. A convenient thing to know." Robert's laugh broke, ragged. "So Stark and the Kingsguard conspire to raise Rhaegar's whelp over my line." Howland's soft voice threaded through the still air. "We conspire only to bury falsehood." Tywin Lannister's chill tone drifted across. "Whether the letter be genuine or no, the realm will wither beneath uncertainty. The Baratheon crown is yet new forged. Doubt is a sword at its throat." Robert caught the words like an offered mace. I will not have my reign shackled by Dornish lies." "Guards." Goldcloaks advanced. Ned's hand found Ice's hilt. Arthur exhaled and raised empty palms. Yet before steel sang, another voice rang out. High, quick, northern as frostbite. "Is the king afraid of parchment?" All heads turned. Arya, Ned's little one, stood at the rear of the hall beside Sansa, gray tunic dusty from sword practice. Her braids were crooked. Septa Mordane blanched, gripping her shoulder to silence her, but too late. The truth of a child's question echoed louder than horns. Guards hesitated. Arthur lowered his hands. "Your Grace," he said softer. "Fear is no sin, but a king must fear the right foes. Paper cannot stab you, yet the lie it silences may yet bleed thousands." Robert glared at Arya, at Ned, at the hall. His chest heaved, rage warring with grief deeper than bone. Ned saw in that tremor the boy he had once known, the lad whose laughter rattled stone, who carried a hammer bigger than sense, who loved Lyanna with a ferocity that no war could quench. But love, twisted by death, had become a shield that crushed as surely as a maul. "Prove it," Robert muttered. "Prove Lyanna wed Rhaegar before I gut you for sport." Arthur inclined his head. To prove a marriage, I would need a septon or godswood. Both stand in King's Landing. Allow me to ride to the great September. There lies Septon Willem on his deathbed, who heard our vows. Pycelle coughed. Willem's mind wanders in fever, your grace. His testimony. Robert cut him off with a spasm of wrist. Enough. I will have proof or I will have heads. His gaze stabbed Ned. And if proof is found, if I was wrong, what then, Stark? Do we raise Rhaegar's brat? Seat him on my throne? Ned felt the chamber pivot upon that single question. He thought of a babe swaddled in blood-spotted linen, breath rattling like dry leaves, cradled against his breast on a bed of shattered stone. He thought of vows whispered to ghosts. No, he said, voice quiet as snow. The child is safe in the north. He need never wear a crown. But the realm must know he is no sin born of rape. Robert's mouth twisted. Words will not turn back years of war. No, Ned admitted. But they may yet prevent the next war if you let them. The king's grip tightened on the throne. Sweat beaded his brow. At length he growled, 3 days. Bring me your witnesses. If they prove the letter true, I will decide what to do with this revelation. His gaze cut to Arthur. Until then, the Kingsguard traitor is my guest in the black cells. Chains clinked as gold cloaks advanced anew. Arthur met them with a wry tilt of head, accepting their grip on his arms. Howland bowed his neck, reluctant. Ned tried to step beside them, but Robert lifted a finger. No. As Arthur passed, he spoke, low enough for Ned alone. Winter's words must be followed by Winter's action. Ned nodded, though dread flowed in his veins like meltwater beneath river ice. He watched Arthur escorted through a side door, white cloak trailing like a torn banner of dawn against stone. When he turned back, the throne room had begun to fracture into knots of whispering lords. Tywin's eyes gleamed like molten gold in a deep mine, calculating, perhaps plotting alliances to harness this tempest. Cersei tugged at Robert's sleeve, murmuring venom. Pycelle fussed with scrolls. Ned felt the air thicken with the scent of stormcloud copper. He bowed stiffly. Your Grace, I shall bring truth. Robert did not answer, head bowed beneath the antlered crown as though the weight, at last, burdened him. Outside in the courtyard, noon glared down like a white-hot anvil. The Red Keep's walls shimmered. Dust rose in lazy ghosts around hooves and sandals. Howland dabbed sweat from his brow while Ned summoned Desmond to ready horses. Squires scurried. Across the yard, Ned's men, Jory Castle, Harwin, the Reed men, clustered with wary eyes. Ned, Howland said, scanning ramparts. The lion's paws move already. Ned followed his gaze. Atop a parapet, a Lannister guard captain spoke in hushes to 2 Sellsword archers. Below, a groom in crimson livery loosed raven cages. Messages swift as malice. It begins, Ned agreed. He strode to Jory. Double the guard on the Hand's Tower. No man enters my chambers save those I name. Send Benjen a raven. Tell him the pup I foster must vanish deeper than snowdrifts. Jory inclined his head. Aye, my lord. His eyes flicked toward the massive iron gate where carts queued out toward the city. If roars rise, we stand. Ned clasped his shoulder gratefully, then swung into his saddle. Howland mounted a shaggy, green-dappled pony. As they turned toward the stable's arch, the summer air seemed to still, the city holding its vast breath. They rode through King's Gate into streets loud with sellers hawking oranges and painted shields. Yet Ned felt unseen watchers in every alley mouth. Word of Lyanna's letter would now swirl through taverns like wildfire in straw. By dusk, every brothel and sept would spit its own version. Truth among them would gleam fragile as hoarfrost. At a crossroads, crowds parted for their horses. A beggar woman cradled her babe. She looked up, eyes webbed with fatigue, and whispered, "Winter Wolf." Ned pressed a stag into her palm. The coin seemed too small a shield against what storms might come. Just south of the Street of Sisters, the great September of Baelor loomed, milky domes reflecting sun in blinding shards. Yet they bypassed its marble steps, for Willem lay not there. Rather, a modest sept beside Rhaenys' hill housed the aged septon who had accompanied Rhaegar to Dorne. Inside, stained glass painted the pews in shards of ruby and jade light. Incense wafted like distant pine smoke. They found Septon Willem lying on a straw mattress, skin translucent as parchment. His breath rattled. When he saw Ned's direwolf sigil, tears gathered in ancient eyes. "I failed her," he croaked. "I wed them, gave blessing, and war slew half a kingdom." Howland knelt, voice soothing, and drew forth a vial. Ned explained why they had come. Willem's bony hand grasped Ned's wrist with startling strength. "If the king seeks my word, he shall have it. But truth is a crippled dog in a street of wild hounds. Lord Stark, guard it." "I will," Ned promised, though the words tasted of rust. They spent hours taking his sworn testimony, committing details to ink under the Sept's sigils of faith. Outside, thunderheads massed over the city. A wind rose off the Blackwater, carrying distant gull cries. When at last they emerged, Ned felt as though he carried a glass heart inside him. One slip, and shards would sever all he loved. On the ride back, as dusk smeared the sky in bruised lilac, Howland spoke quietly. "Arthur said winter's action. He means to raise banners. He cannot from a cell.
No.
But his name alone may summon loyalty. Dayne blood is old. The Torrentine will stir. And the North will not move until I say—" Ned cut in, harsher than intended. Howland fell silent, accepting.
Ned sighed.
"Forgive me, but the North has bled enough. I will not plunge Winterfell into fresh war." Howland eyed him. "Wars are not always chosen by those who fight them." They rode the rest of the way in silence as torches flared along the city wall, each flame a spark on oil-soaked cloth. Night found Ned standing on his balcony overlooking the maze of King's Landing rooftops. Storm clouds curtained the moon, lightning flickering like the pulse of a god caged behind ribs of cloud. On the table behind him lay Willem's sworn testimony, sealed. Yet for all its certainty, Ned felt less secure than when he first lifted Lyanna's body from her bed of roses. Inside, Arya slept curled with needle clutched under her pillow, and Sansa dreamed of courts and songs. Catelyn paced below stairs, fretting over ravens from Riverrun. In the dungeons, Arthur Dayne likely sat in darkness, perhaps whispering to ghosts. Ned closed his eyes. A memory came unbidden. Lyanna's voice at dusk, daring him to race along the King's Road. Her laughter, wild as wind in the weirwood branches. And beneath it, always the promise he made on a bed of blood. Protect her child, protect her truth, whatever it cost. The cost now loomed like that thunderhead. Yet Eddard Stark was a man of winter. Storms did not deter him, they defined him. He opened his eyes to the horizon where lightning forked beyond the walls. Somewhere beyond, the neck and moat Kaelin brooded, and further still, Winterfell's towers rose above cold forests. If he must raise the North again, he would do so not for vengeance but for the fragile shoot of truth just piercing soil. Far below, in the streets, distant shouts erupted. A riot, perhaps, or merely tavern revelry. Ned could not tell. He listened, pulse quickening. A voice within whispered that the city's heart had begun to pound a rhythm none could silence now. He stepped back from the balustrade. Ice lay on the table. He brushed the pommel, feeling the carved direwolf beneath his thumb. "Winter's action," Arthur had said. The phrase lingered like a breath turning to frost in cold air. The storm broke overhead. Rain drummed the tiles, sluicing down gargoyle spouts. Lightning lit the keep in white flashes, and in one such flash Ned glimpsed the ghost of Lyanna reflected in the window glass. Wild, sorrowful, imploring. Then darkness claimed her again, and he was alone with thunder, yet not wholly alone. Somewhere beneath court intrigue, in shadows behind walls, allies stirred. Northmen who would answer the direwolf banner, river lords who owed debts to Winterfell, even the silent watchers of the Kingsguard who still revered oaths higher than crowns. If truth proved sharper than any blade, they would rally to its edge. And so Ned breathed deep of rain-clean air, straightened his shoulders, and turned toward the hall where his family slept. Outside, King's Landing drowned in the first deluge of summer, washing blood from cobblestones, though not yet from hearts. Above the thunder, the bells of the great September tolled again, this time the hour of ghosts. Their mournful clang seemed to Ned a herald, not of endings, but of the long night of reckoning now begun. Ned rose before dawn, though dawn itself lingered behind bruised clouds unwilling to pale. Rain still whispered through the open shutters, a softer, steadier music after the night's thunderous drums. He tamped the wick of a lone candle, its glow just bright enough to map the grain of the small wooden chest at the foot of his bed, the chest that held his father's seal, the raven kit, and 3 lengths of unbleached wool ribbon. He unlatched it, mindful of Caitlyn's steady breathing behind him, and slipped out the ribbons. One white as hoarfrost, one gray as fresh-forged steel, and one black as a moonless barrow. He laid them across his palm a moment, feeling the weight of woven oaths his house had kept since the age of heroes, then knotted them together in a simple triple twist. When the knots sat firm, he pressed the braid to his lips, as a brother might kiss a sister's brow before a long road, and tucked it into the inner pocket of his jerkin. Whatever came in the throne room's next convocation, he would carry Winterfell there, thread by thread. By the time he had dressed, gray light peered through the storm's lingering shreds. He crossed to the hearth, poured water from a pewter ewer, and splashed his face. Coolness cut a trench through last night's weary grit. He straightened, and in the burnished copper mirror above the mantel he glimpsed the same tired lines that had haunted him since the neck. Pale grooves at the mouth, new flecks of silver beside his temples. Eddard Stark looked older in King's Landing than he ever had on the wall of Winterfell's gods would keep. A soft rustle behind him. Caitlyn stirred. Her auburn hair spilled across linen like cedar needles blown on snow. She lifted onto elbows, eyes still veiled with sleep's haze, until they focused on the silent braids sticking from his breast. Concern sharpened them. "You ride out again?" she whispered. "Only to the dungeons," he said, voice kept low so as not to wake the girls in the next chamber. "Arthur Dayne deserves word of what we have." He hesitated, "and I must gauge his strength for what lies ahead." She swung her legs over the side, nightdress brushing the rug. "If the king refuses to see reason, you are arming a sword against yourself. The realm weighs heavier than my life." He tried to smile, but it felt like stretching dry parchment. "Besides, I have you to keep sense where it belongs." Caitlyn reached for his hand. Fingers linked. Lightning gone. Only rain tapped at the dolorous silence between them. "Send word the moment you know," she said. "I will rouse Maester Wolken to ready Raven's north. If things break, they will break," he finished gently. "But we will mend them, together." She squeezed once, then released. No more could be said without waking fear in walls already echoing with secrets. Ned draped his cloak, slid ice across his back, and left. The torchlit stair to the black cells coiled deeper than any well in Winterfell. Each step seemed to swallow the last. Each echo died quicker, choked by old damp and stale breath of forgotten traitors. Ned's escort comprised only Hallis Mullen and a lanky silent goldcloak who kept eyes front. Robert had not barred visitors, at least not yet, but neither did the king care to publicize Stark footfalls into the bowels. Keys clanked. An iron gate conceded with a reluctant groan, and they entered a corridor narrow as a hunting blind. Cells gaped left and right, mouths of rough-cut stone. Most lay empty, yet Ned glimpsed shapes hunched in straw, gaunt arms drawn around ribs, eyes glazed by torch flame after endless dark. The smell, rot, fear, old dung, clung like an oily cloak. At the last cell sat Arthur Dayne, cross-legged upon a slab. His wrists bore new bruises where irons had pinched, but chains now lay slack. The jailer knew the Knight of the Dawn could no more wield sorcery than sprout wings. His hair, loose from its thong, cascaded pale as starlight over shoulders. When Ned approached, the violet eyes opened. and for a heartbeat he might have been one of those dead heroes carved on old undull tombs, grave and luminous in candle hush. "Lord Stark," he said, voice threadbare yet steady. "Past sunrise and still no breakfast? Kingslander hospitality wanes." Hallis hung the torch and withdrew to the gate.
Ned crouched.
Between the bars their knees almost touched. He could see the slow rhythm of Arthur's breath, each inhale scored by ribache. "Proof is gathered," he said. "Septon Willem wills to speak, and the letter sits where half the city whispers of it. But the lion's claws burrow quick. If Tywin turns Robert before midday, we may lose the ear of court." Arthur inclined his head, eyes thoughtful. "Tywin Lannister is a mountain only seeming still. Beneath, rivers melt stone. We must be a frost deeper still, that cracks his base before he knows the thaw began." "Winter's action," Ned murmured, recalling the phrase. "Aye." Arthur shifted, wincing. "Truth alone seldom saves. It must march abreast of spears. My sister, Ashera, may yet command support in Dorne if she learns of these events. Gerald Dayne holds high hermitage, no friend to Tywin. And your bannermen, once roused, will ride only if the king's writ calls them traitors," Ned said. "I would spare them such branding." Arthur's faint smile cut deeper than scorn. "Do not spare men their right to choose, Stark. Honor rides heavier when untested." Before Ned could answer, the gold cloak returned bearing a wooden bowl and a heel of bread, watery pottage bobbing with 2 lonely barley grains. Arthur raised a brow. "Tea of kings," he quipped, accepting it. When the guard retreated, Ned reached inside his jerkin, drawing the triple-knotted braid. "A sign of the north," he said, pushing it through the gap. "It means I have sworn to raise our banners if this city forbids truth." Arthur wrapped long fingers around the ribbon. Something softened behind his stoic visage, almost wonder. "Then dawn shall rise beside winter," he whispered. With care, he fastened the braid around his injured wrist, not against the pulse. "Go. I shall survive my cell a few more hours. But do not tarry past royal supper. Tywin feasts on twilight deals." Ned nodded, stood, and motioned to Hallis. As they climbed, a distant echo of metal rang, perhaps a gate shutting somewhere far below, or fate forging new shackles on their path. Ned knew not which. By breakfast's late hour, the rains had passed. Sunlight flared harsh along the city's slick roofs, a million tiny mirrors signaling every raven loft from here to Dragonstone. Ned, dismounting outside the Tower of the Hand, found Howland Reed waiting under a stone arch where vines dripped clear beads. The Cranagman's brow furrowed. "Ravens have flown to Casterly Rock and Storm's End both," he reported. "I saw their livery leaving the rookery. Tywin sparks his own torches. And Stannis? None to Dragonstone yet, but Maester Pycelle coughed up 2 scrolls with the wax of the crowned stag. If those go unchallenged, Robert's line closes ranks. Then we light our beacon first." Ned motioned him inside. They ascended to the solar where sepia light warmed a map-strewn oak table. Catelyn and Maester Wolkan already hovered there. She held a quill poised above parchment stamped with dire wolf and trout. Bran's spidery writing practice filled scraps near Wolkan's elbow, earlier lessons abandoned for weightier dispatch. "We are drafting letters to Lord Manderley, Lady Barbary, Lord Glover, the Barrows, House Tallheart," Catelyn said by way of greeting. "Each requests sparse levy of riders, fewer than 100, to gather at White Harbor under trade pretense." Ned scanned the neat northern circuit. "Good. Quiet movements until trumpets call." He picked a fresh parchment. "We add Lord Hoster and Riverrun. Tully ears must hear winter's whispers." Catelyn dipped quill anew. Wolkan dripped green sealing wax into a warming spoon. Howland unfolded a slim packet. Septon Willem's sworn testimony, already copied thrice. "One for the king, one for the High Septon, and one for the Citadel," Ned finished. "Archmesters love parchment near as much as power. Let them weigh truth beside political convenience." They wrote, sealed, and bound within the hour. A dozen ravens beat skyward, black petals against a sheet of azure. Ned watched from the balcony until they blurred to motes. Each carried hope coupled with risk. If intercepted, proof might vanish into lion jaws. Yet stalling meant certain ruin. When the last feather winked gone, he turned to Howland. "Gather our men in the practice yard. I would address them." The Red Keep's yard bustled. Squires hustling pails, royal smiths hammering at links, Tyrell men walking roses across straw. Ned's retinue, Jory, Will, Desmond, Harwin, Allen, Vayenpool's son, formed a loose line by the butts. Gray cloaks snapped in a mild wind. Their expressions shifted from relief at seeing him alive to steely concern. Ned strode before them. "You have heard whispers. I will speak plainly. My sister Lyanna was not stolen nor dishonored. She wed Prince Rhaegar Targaryen of her own will, and bore him a child. We have proof signed by her hand and sworn by a septon. Today we present that truth before king and realm." Murmurs. Men exchanged glances. Jory's hand rotated on his sword hilt. Allen's jaw clenched. Will spat into dust. Ned continued. "Some in this city will call us liars, traitors, turncloaks. If Robert orders my arrest, I will not draw Winterfell into rebellion. Not until proof is weighed by gods and men. But if the king decides truth must die to preserve a lie, I will refuse that order, and they will come for me." He surveyed eyes meeting his. "I will not command you to break oath or crown. Each must choose by his own conscience. If the choice is Winterfell, gather at the river gate at dusk. We ride for the Eyrie to seek Lady Erin's neutrality. If the choice is the crown, remain. I will bear no ill will, nor will your kin back home." A hush thicker than smoke settled. Then Harwin stepped forward and knelt, fist over heart. "Where you walk, winter rides, my lord." Jory followed. "My sword is stark steel." Others bent knees one by one until only Will remained, arms folded. His weathered face twitched. Finally he grunted. Figured the wolf sniffed trouble. I'm in." He spat again, but nearer Ned's boot. A soldier's blessing.
Ned exhaled.
"Mounts ready at dusk then. Tell no one beyond our number. 7 watch over us." As they dispersed, he noticed one figure lingering behind a rack of practice spears, half hidden by a Tyrell shield. Sandor Clegane, the Hound. Burn-scarred features unreadable. He stared after Ned with canine intensity. Their eyes locked. Sandor tilted his head, almost curious, then pivoted away toward the stables. Ned filed it with other dark omens. Midday bells pealed. Court summons arrived, borne by a hawk-nosed squire in gilded stag jerkin. The king required Lord Eddard Stark, Lord Tywin Lannister, Prince Renly, Grand Maester Pycelle, and Master of Coin Baelish in the throne room within the hour. The summons mentioned no Queensguard knight nor Cranigman. Ned felt the trap's jaws outlined. Still, he had expected no different. He armed lightly, simple brigandine beneath a plain surcoat, ice left in chambers to avert claims of intimidation. Caitlin intercepted him at the tower stair, pressing cool fingers to his cheek. "Remember the king once loved you like a brother," she said. "Find that Robert if you can."
Ned kist her forret.
"I will try." The procession to the throne room felt shorter than yesterday. Tension shrank corridors. Lannister guards in crimson halberds lined the passage. Their commander wore a golden lion half-mask concealing nose and cheek, eyes glinting. Ned wondered if Tywin had replaced the Red Keep's household guard overnight. Inside, banners of stag and lion draped above the iron throne, none of wolf or trout. Robert sat, flanked by Renly on the lower step and Barristan Selmy beside the dais. Lord Tywin stood at the king's right, hand resting on pommel of a jeweled sword not unsheathed since the trident. Opposite him, Varys perched like a feather-robed raven, half-smile curved. As Ned approached the foot of the throne, Pycelle unfurled a scroll. His voice droned, listing charges drafted in ornate script. Misleading the crown, harboring a Kingsguard knight, fomenting unrest. Ned listened as though hearing a distant river. When the maester paused for breath, Robert leaned forward. "Eddard Stark," the king said, Yesterday you brought forth a letter and claims that upend the very stones of my reign. I have sent riders to fetch Septon Willem. He may arrive before the morrow. Until such time I must keep order. Do you contest these measures?" He gestured to the list. Ned bowed stiffly. "I do contest none but the claim of deceit. I offered truth." "And so you shall continue," Robert said softer. "But Tywin believes your safety, and the cities require you yield your sword, your men, and remain in secure quarters. Until the Septon speaks." Secure quarters, Ned knew, meant a chamber scarcely wider than a cell. "If I am behind bolts, I cannot seek further corroboration." Renly shifted. "Eddard speaks sense, brother. A stag learns little bound to a pole." Tywin's nostrils flickered. One day's suspension of liberty is a small toll given what fires could rage if rumors fan the streets.
Ned met Robert's stare.
"Your grace, chain me and every whispering mouth will claim you fear parchment more than dragons. Leave me free and you show faith in truth." The king's jaw worked. Sweat pearled his brow again. Memories fought duty behind those blue eyes. At last he barked, "Very well. Ned remains free under watch of Lord Commander Selmy. But his men shall stand down and quarter in the Hand's Tower." Selmy inclined his silver head. "I will keep the peace." Tywin's lips thinned, yet he said nothing. Robert exhaled hard. "Bring Septon Willem swift, and Eddard, for both our sakes. Pray he remembers vows clearer than his own name."
Ned bowed.
"I shall fetch him myself." Tywin stepped forward, voice silk on steel. "My king, Lord Stark's absence from the city could invite flight. I will travel with 2 guards and Ser Barristan," Ned countered. "No host can flee at such pace." Barristan nodded. "An honor." Robert waved a weary hand. "Do as you must, but return before sunset tomorrow. Court rises." The herald sounded dismissal. Lords peeled away like tides receding, leaving Ned and Selmy alone under the throne's looming shadow. The old knight turned, face lined with worry. "I pray truth proves gentle," he murmured. Ned clasped his forearm. "As do I." Word spread faster than their saddles could move. By the time Ned, Barristan, and 2 royal guards cantered through Cobbler's Square, merchants had shuttered stalls and small folk gathered around soapbox criers. A tall woman waved a blue cloak, shouting, "Wolf's sister wed dragon prince. Crown forged on lies." A red-faced smith bellowed back, "Stark treason. Kill the Kingsguard ghost." Fists rose. Rocks flew. The royal guard forced a path with spear hafts. Ned glimpsed a boy tumble under hooves. He shouted, leapt down, dragged the lad clear. Barristan's armored hand hoisted them both to safety on a wagon bed. 2 more children followed, clinging to his cloak. Thrice Ned raised his voice, calling for calm, but fear had breached its levees and would not retreat. At last they reached the modest Sepp's gate. Inside, candlelit hush greeted them, a shocking balm after the square's frenzy. But peace fractured at the sickroom door. Septon Willem lay still, head lolling, one wrist bound in cloth stained by dried brown. A sister in faith knelt beside his cot, eyes red. "He drank milk of the poppy through the night," she said, voice trembling. Toward dawn he seemed mended, spoke clearer. Then his heart stopped, Ned's chest hollowed. He exchanged glance with Barristan. The knight's mouth drew tight. "Poison?" Selmy asked the sister. I do not know, sir." Ned approached the cot. Willem's lips retained faint color, not the gray of long illness. 2 tears had dried at the corners of his eyes like tiny salt pearls. Ned closed them with gentle thumb and whispered, "Thank you, old one," but grief swiftly yielded to ice. He stood and scanned shelves, phials, powders, herb bundles. 1 vial lay uncorked on a low stool, sweet scent cloying. Poppy, perhaps, yet any thick draught could mask blacker venom. Ned turned to the sister. "Who tended him last?" She wiped cheeks. "Grand Maester Pycelle sent an acolyte with stronger draught. Said his grace himself ordered pains easing. The acolyte left after Willem drank." Ned's gut twisted. "Did you taste it?" She shook her head. Barristan's voice grated. An acolyte in white? Aye, sir. Pycelle keeps a dozen youths, Selmy muttered. Some imported from the rock. Ned swallowed anger. We ride back at once. Selmy nodded grimly. They covered Willem's face, offered a swift prayer, and departed. The ride to the Red Keep felt like galloping through oil awaiting spark. Word of Willem's death raced ahead. Each twist of lane brought new skirmish. Outside the Street of Steel, Baratheon loyalists punched a Sellsword in white cloak until teeth scattered the gutter. At the Hook, small folk hurled rotten turnips at a man in wolfskin hat until he splashed into the bay. The smell of panic thickened the breeze. They dismounted in the outer ward. Barristan left to summon the king. Ned sprinted up 3 flights to the Hand's Tower. At his door, Jory waited, face drawn. Riders came. Order for us to disarm, he said. I stalled them. You did well, but stalling ends. Ned ushered him inside where Howland and Will pored over a city map, pins marking wells and postern gates. Catelyn stood near Arya, hands on the girl's shoulders. Sansa sobbed quietly in a chair. Ned shut the door. Septon Willem is dead. Poison almost certain. Tywin moves now. We depart at dusk no matter Robert's decree. Howland's eyes flashed swamp green. Truth strangled in its cradle. Not yet, Ned said. He unrolled a fresh parchment and wrote swift, crisp lines. Dear Lord Arryn, Robert deceived. Lyanna's letter enclosed copy. Request safe harbor in the Eyrie. He stamped it, thrust it to Wolken. Find me a daring raven. Next he turned to Catelyn. Gather what you must within the hour. Arya, Sansa, dress for travel. We ride light. Jory, post a runner to the stables. Have 6 hardy mounts saddled, plus 2 for the girls. Sansa rose, voice thin. Father, are we leaving King's Landing forever? Only for a time, he said, pulling her into an embrace. Sooner back if the gods are kind. Arya's eyes blazed. Leaving means they win. Leaving means we live, Ned answered. And truth lives with us. She didn't argue, only nodded grimly and slipped from Catelyn's hold to fetch needle. Ned watched, heart lurching at her budding ferocity. A wolf's daughter indeed. When the room emptied save Howland and Jory, Ned fetched a small leather pouch from the map chest. Inside nestled a silver-shod wooden flute, Lyanna's, carved in Winterfell's godswood. He pressed it into Howland's hand. If I fall, bring this to Jon. Tell him his mother loved the sound of rivers over reeds. Howland's throat bobbed. But you will not fall. Ned clasped shoulders. If winter teaches aught, it is that limbs die so the tree survives. Keep the sap alive. Hourglass sands bled slower than Ned's pulse. When dusk's first violet hint touched the high windows, they moved. 8 figures slipped down a servant's stair behind the buttery. Ned, Catelyn, Arya, Sansa, Jory, Will, Desmond, and Howland. Alan lingered to mislead any watchers with candle families on upper floors. They emerged in a narrow corridor snaking to a postern gate seldom used except by Mason crews. Outside, the yard seemed deserted. Torches flared but no patrol. Rain puddles mirrored rose-gold sky. Yet Ned sensed the hush of waiting spears. They crossed to the stables unchallenged. Within, a stable boy dozed atop a bale. Jory's coin earlier ensured mounts readied. 6 horses, waterskins filled, hooves already shod quiet. As they saddled, footsteps thundered. Sandor Clegane appeared in the arch, breath pluming, sword in hand. Going somewhere, Wolf? Ned spun, shielded Arya behind him. The hound halted, raising empty palm. Easy. The lion sends hunters through every gate. They'll smell your lot soon. He glanced back toward courtyard. I owe the imp a favor. He said help the wolf leave. Fewer heads roll later. Tyrion? Ned asked, baffled. Aye. Lannister with brains. Hide along the western postern. I'll loose the yard hounds there at 3rd bell. Noise draws guards. Ride the Kennel Lane to Mudgate. Smuggler's Cove below the bluff houses a cotter named Fergo. He'll row you upriver to the rush flats where horses canter free. After that, 7 no. Ned weighed trust in seconds. Sandor's scar glistened. One could not fake that brand of apathy toward court games. Why help? The hound shrugged. King's Landing stinks. Wolves and hounds share fleas, not kennels. He backed away. Third bell. Then he vanished. Will snorted. Never thought I'd follow a butcher's dog, but life's gone queer. Ned secured saddle packs, lifted Arya up. We follow any path that veers from lion fangs. He swung astride. Helms down. Ride silent. They led mounts through inner rings, skirting lit windows. Twice they ducked alcoves while Lannister patrols marched past, crimson cloaks snapping. Sansa trembled but bit her lip. At a sally port near the kennels they waited in shadowed niche. Minutes crawled. Then, a peal of bells from the Sept Tower, 1, 2, 3. Seconds later, feral bays erupted. Hounds yapping, kennel doors banging. Guards shouted. Torches swarmed toward the noise. Now, Ned hissed. They slid through the postern, down a weed-clogged ramp to a disused lane hugging the cliff wall. Hoofbeats muted by moss, they wound between root-snagged stone piles and reached Mud Gate unmolested save for gull cries. Gate wardens bickered over dice inside their booth. Sandor's promised distraction seemed thorough. Past the gate, a twisting path led to river docks where half-sunken wherries bobbed. Fergo the cotter waited by a black-tarred skiff, hair shock-white, torch in hand. He eyed them, spat river water, and gestured to board. 2 younger men hauled horses onto a flat-hulled barge tethered astern. As Ned handed Sansa across, hoofbeats thundered up lane behind. Lannister voices barked, "Search the bank!" Fergo snarled, "Cut the mooring." The skiff lurched, current seizing. Arrows hissed from the quay, splashing. Arya drew needle, useless yet fierce. Catelyn shielded her with cloak. Jory and Will loosed return shafts from short bows. In Moonrise Brews, steel flashed and water churned. Then they cleared the shadow of the bluff. The Blackwater's broad breast bore them north, sails furled till safe distance. Kingston's bonfire torches receded to sparkling scars on the dark. Ned exhaled for first time in hours. Over Rush's hum he heard Sansa whisper, "Father, what of the truth?" "It sails with us," he answered. Inside his jerkin Lyanna's letter pressed warm to his heart, though parchment could not heat. In another pouch lay the sealed copy of Willem's oath. Northward beyond the trident awaited answers, maybe allies. Behind them, King's Landing's walls loomed like an angry crown. Thunderheads massed anew beyond the city. Lightning flickered pale in their bellies. Ned watched until distance blurred towers to jagged silhouettes. In the hush, he felt the choice he had made crystallize into solid, irrevocable shape. Winter's action. They rowed upriver through the night, silent save for poles splashing as Fergo's rowers steered through inky channels. Stars glimmered overhead, newly born after the storm. Somewhere to the east, the Kingswood sighed, red leaves rustling a lullaby older than dragons. At dawn, they reached a marshy inlet where willows bent to sip water. Swallows darted low, skimming gnats. Ned and his men led horses ashore onto springy sedge. Fergo declined coin beyond the fee Tyrion had paid. "A debt paid twice grows fangs," he muttered, and pushed off before sun topped the treeline. They saddled quietly. Howland pointed north-northwest. "Fortnight's ride to the Bloody Gate if we cut across the Riverlands." He tapped the map. "Wispwood first.
Sparse village.
Lord Piper's lands beyond." Jory squinted at low clouds. "If river lords remain loyal to the crown, they'll block the fords." "Then we swim," Arya said, earning a weary smile from Howland. They rode single file into whispering grass, dew brushing boot leather. The land here felt younger than the politics behind them. Crickets chirped, unseen boar snuffled. Sansa hummed a lullaby half-remembered from Winterfell's nursery. It mingled with birdsong. Ned's mind drifted to Arthur Dayne, still caged beneath the Red Keep. He pictured the silver knight touching the braided ribbons, summoning resolve. Whether Robert chose mercy or murder, Arthur would not bend without purpose. The north may yet march paired with Dorne, snow with sunrise, to lift truth's banner. But first, Ned must secure the Eyrie and speak with Jon Arryn's widow, Lisa. Toward midday, they entered scraggly woodland. Sun shafts speared through birch trunks, dappling earth in gold coins. Howland halted suddenly, lifted fist. Silence. A thrush startled, wings thrumming. Ned listened, wind, leaves, distant brook. Then a soft twang. Arrow thudded into a spruce beside Jory's knee. He cursed, wheeled. Bandits? No. Ned spotted crests on approaching riders. Muddy blue field quartered by red flute. Bracken men. A voice rang across clearing. Lord Stark, in King Robert's name, you are commanded to halt and surrender arms. Their leader, a wiry knight with scarred cheek, drew rein 10 yards away, flanked by 10 spearmen. More shapes shifted in undergrowth, at least 20. Ned's party numbered 8, 2 harms burdened by children. He nudged his mare forward a length. Sire, on whose writ do you act? The knight tossed a parchment tube. Ned caught it, uncorked. Inside, a fresh royal decree bore Robert's seal and Tywin's script. Eddard Stark, charged with abduction of royal ward Sansa and Arya Stark, to be returned to King's Landing alive. Others with him considered accomplices. Abduction, twisting truth with viper's skill. Ned raised his voice. My daughters ride with their father of their own will. These claims are false. The knight shrugged. Gold grant pardon to those who obey, not to those who argue. Dismount. Back at Ned's side, Howland whispered, Riverlords hungry for Tywin's coin will not heed talk. Jory unsheathed steel half a finger. We'll spit. Arya muttered. We can outrun them. But Sansa clutched Ned's arm. Her blue eyes brimmed. Father, not more killing. Please. Ned's heart drove stakes into ribs. Winter's action had come sooner than planned. Truth tested by iron again. He weighed choices. Surrender meant shackles, children hostages. Fight meant blood shed across a woodland floor, his daughters steeped in screams. Wind stirred leaves overhead, a noise like ghosts whispering. Lyanna's voice seemed to ride that wind. Protect the child. He heard Robb's laughter, Bran's eager shout leaping walls. Heard Catelyn's breath the night he left for the south. These men before him were not Tywin's golden legions. They were small folk turned Celspear, bonds more coin than loyalty. Fear could peel them like bark. Ned looked to the knight. Sire, will your men bleed for a lie? A scoff. They'll bleed for coin. Perhaps. Ned's signs beckoned Jory. The captain swung down, paced to midpoint, sword held low. Ned followed, empty hands raised to show peace. Arya started. Catelyn grabbed her reins. Ned addressed the Bracken men louder. Hear me. King Robert has not judged treason. That trial awaits. But the Lion's Gold already writes verdicts. Do you serve coin or king? I ride to the Eyrie to place truth before Lord Arryn's widow, the king's sister by marriage. Let her weigh. If I lie, may the stranger take me. The knight sneered. You spout charms, Stark, while your Northmen loose arrows.
Nuahos loozid, sir.
See, he lifted his cloak edges. If you detain us, rivers will flood with rumor of bandits in Bracken lands seizing the Hand's daughters. Lord Jonas will taste Robert's wrath for that scandal. Unease flickered among spearmen. They glanced at one another. The knight's jaw clenched. Big words. Truth's words, Ned pressed. Ride with us to the next ford. Hear our tale. If still unswayed, escort us to Stonehenge under your banner. Let Lord Bracken judge, hearing both sides. Silence stretched. Leaves trembled. Finally, a spearman near back spoke. Sire, the king may as like bless us for safe escort as curse for metal. Hedge our bets, eh? Another nodded. The knight cursed under breath, then spat. Very well, escort. But one wrong twitch, wolf, and your daughters find arrowheads. Relief washed through Ned like thaw water. He signaled the group to mount forward. Howland raised brows in quiet admiration. Arya sheathed needle, though she shot daggers with eyes at the spearmen. They rode under guard, tension braided with wary respect. Ned talked with the knight Serlisle, learning Tywin's ravens had reached Stonehenge at dawn. Jonas Bracken offered a golden stag per Stark man, 5 per daughter. Yet Bracken also despised Lannisters for debts owed since the Blackfyre rebellions. Greed vied with grudges, another fissure Ned could widen. At dusk they made camp along a willow-lined bank. Fires crackled. Ned ate little, mind-parsing alliances, perils. Riverlords could tip scales. Catelyn's father wielded influence, but Walder Frey's bridge loomed ahead, and Frey loyalty followed the wind's strongest gust. He walked beyond camp to a small rise overlooking the river. Fireflies winked. Night smelled of wild mint. Footsteps behind Howland. "You parleyed well," the Crannogman said, "but tomorrow stones turn anew." "Like walking on a weirwood's roots," Ned answered. "One misstep, and you bleed." They stood in companionable silence until Howland spoke again, quietly. "My dreams speak of Arthur, chains melting as sunrise strikes. Steel yields to dawn. Do you foresee escape?" Ned asked. "Perhaps. Or rescue." Howland's moss-green gaze glimmered. "Either road ends in swords unsheathed."
Ned nodded.
"Then we ride faster." In King's Landing, well past midnight, a lone figure crept along the narrow drain tunnel that vomited into the Blackwater's dark. Heathed in sodden black, he carried a slim bundle swaddled in doeskin, a blade pale as morning glow. 2 oarsmen waited in a moored skiff. Silver coin shimmered in a gloved hand, promise of passage to the Kingswood's far bank. As the figure stepped into moonlight, water sluicing from cloak, his hair gleamed like forged dawn. Ser Arthur Dayne had slipped his cage. The black cells now missed their ghost. Dawn spilled wine gold over the riverlands when Ned's party reached the Green Forks ford below Stonehenge. Bracken riders flanked them across knee-deep water. On the far bank, a mixed contingent in Tully Blue and Trout standards awaited, 50 riders, fronted by Ser Brynden Blackfish Tully himself, mail gleaming. His hawk eyes appraised Ned with blend of relief and urgency. "Bracken," he spat toward Serlisle. "You heard prized calves or hostages?" "Escort by royal decree," Serlisle muttered, handing over the king's parchment. Brynden skimmed, snorted. "Royal." He crumpled it. A lion's turd tied with a stag's ribbon. He tossed it into the ford. "Lord Stark, ride with me. Riverrun stands ready to cloak your truth." Serlisle hesitated, but Bracken's spears parted. Ned's heart rose. Safe harbor, at least for now. As they crested a hill, Riverrun's towers glowed ahead where Tumblestone and Red Fork kissed. Yet even amidst relief, Ned felt the tremor of forces converging. A night of dawn loose in woods, Lannister gold spilling through Raven's wings, Robert's heart torn like a siege banner. Winter's action had begun its march, slow as glacier but as relentless. And in its shadow, a northern coalition stirred, drawn by truth's cry and by snow-forged honor that would not let lies reign unchallenged. River mist unfurled like pale silk as the party wound down the grassy slope toward Riverrun's triple-watered bastion. Tumblestone and Red Fork carved bright ribbons under the waxing sun, and the fortress itself rose in red stone tiers, banners of leaping trout snapping above crenellations. Catelyn's breath caught at the sight of her girlhood home. The scent of wet moss and river spray carried memories so sharp they almost hurt. Her mother's gentle scolding, Lisa's laughter on the battlements, Bran toddling after his grandfather with a wooden trout in fist. She rode beside Ned, fingers white-knuckled on the reins, as though each hoofbeat might be the last safe sound before chaos raked them again. Ser Brynden guided them along the causeway between rivers, the currents on either side muscling against stone pilings. Guards in mail hauberks raised visors and saluted, recognizing both the Blackfish's silver trout and the direwolf crest that had once courted their lady. As the gatehouse portcullis rattled upward, Ned noted the extra ballistae fixed atop the barbican, ropes freshly tarred, bolts the thickness of saplings stacked in neat pyramids. Riverrun was bristling like an old badger expecting hounds. They dismounted in the outer yard where stable hands spilled like minnows, leading horses away. Rickard Karstark's third son, Harwin, stretched sore knees, while Will sniffed river air with suspicion. Arya slid down and dashed to peer over the parapet at the swirling join of waters. Jory caught her collar before she leaned too far. Catelyn placed a palm on Sansa's back, ushering her toward the keep entrance where servants flanked the doorways, eyes curious yet wary. Inside the great hall, banners lined the pillars. Tully red and blue, Blackwood ravens, Frey twin towers, Mallister's eagle. Lord Hoster Tully reclined on a wheeled chair draped in wool, pale as parchment but eyes still river-bright. Maester Vyman hovered behind him, and Lysa Arryn, visiting from the Eyrie, paced near the hearth, her flaxen hair loose over a cherry velvet gown. At the sight of Catelyn, she hurried forward, arms spread. The sisters met in a fierce embrace that drained some of the tension from the room. Hoster beckoned Ned close. The old lord's voice rustled like reeds. Words reach us quicker than riders these days, yet truth always limps. Sit, son, and tell me what winter wind blows you south with daughters in tow. Ned knelt on one knee, but Hoster waved the formality aside. Here we are family, not throne polishers. Still, Ned's reply carried weight of court. He recounted Lyanna's letter, Septon Willem's oath, Arthur Dayne's testimony, the poisoning, the royal decree twisting rescue into abduction. Each detail made the hall's tapestries seem to tremble. Lysa gasped and clutched her collar at mention of poison. Hoster's knotted hands tightened on the armrests. Bryndon's jaw set like a drawbridge. When Ned finished, silence pooled between stone flags. Water roar outside the tall windows filled the gap. At last Hoster spoke. I knew Robert's boiling heart might scald more than foes, yet I never dreamt he would call Lyanna's memory a lie. Robert is being driven by counsel, Ned said, voice tight. Tywin's counsel. He produced the sealed testimony, placed it on a side table. I would bring this to the Eyrie for safekeeping and ask your blessing to rally honest men who still value Stark and Tully oaths. Brynden stepped forward, eyes like flint. Riverrun stands on the knife's edge. We have messages. Lord Frey pledges crossing to whichever side pays first. Jonas Bracken refuses Tywin's coin but withholds swords. The Blackwoods stir old feuds. But this hall remembers doom when lions roar unchecked. He looked to Hoster. The Lord of Riverrun took a shaking breath. The Tully words bind us. Family, duty, honor. Family stands before us. Duty demands succor. Honor requires truth. We will shelter Winterfell's line and proclaim no treason here. His hand floated to a silver bell on the chair arm. He rang it twice. Guards entered. Hoster commanded them to close portcullises and double watches. Catelyn exhaled. Sansa struggled to keep dignified posture, but relief lit her face. Arya grinned outright until Lysa scolded her for undermining ladylike decorum. Arya rolled her eyes and pretended to strangle an invisible foe behind Lys. A's back, earning a swift elbow from Jory. Late morning unfurled into a council of war. In a solar paneled with cedar, Brynden unrolled maps across a trestle. Pins sprouted like brass weeds, one for each house rumored to sway. Ned, still dusty-booted, leaned over the parchment. Walder Frey sits here, crossing of the Green Fork, Brynden said, jabbing. If he locks his gates, Northmen cannot pour south without swimming or marching the neck. But Frey has more grandchildren than honor. A marriage alliance or heavy purse might tilt him. How likely to hold for Tywin? Ned asked. Lannister gold rattles loud, but Frey craves status. He yearns for a queen of his stock, a crown for his brood. If we offer him the possibility that truth alone brings, a realm indebted, he may hedge. Howland Reed drummed fingers softly. Risky. If Frey sniffs Targaryen blood claim, he may sell rumor rather than pledge. Jory reported next. Scouts along the Trident saw Lannister outriders near Harrenhal, perhaps securing the ruined castle as southern springboard. Another message arrived by Raven. In King's Landing, Robert had withdrawn to Hunting Lodge after a furious clash with Cersei. The city now effectively under Lord Tywin's steward, Ser Kevan. Goldcloak patrols roamed every district. Varys whispered of curfews at dusk. Meanwhile, far to the southwest, rumors from Starfall drifted upriver. Lady Dayne had offered sanctuary to refugees of truth and blamed the King's Council for her brother's imprisonment. Dornish lords debated whether to dispatch riders north with swords and copies of Desert Chronicles Rhaegar kept. If Dorne rose, the realm would tremble on 3 axes. Ned listened, pain behind his eyes. He saw the storm spreading. Lines of levy spears glinting across wheat fields. River fords choked with corpses, smoke above hamlets. All for a truth that should have required only courage, not steel. Yet courage alone had been denied its stage. He stood, stretching stiff shoulders. We must reach the Eyrie swiftly. Their Lyanna's letter can be read before Lords Declarant and recorded by maesters of the Vale, scribes less likely bribed by Lannister coin. Once truth is written in as many ledgers as there are septons, killing me or mine will not scour it. Hoster nodded. Brynden will escort you to the foothills. My health prevents me, but Riverrun's gates stay open. Lisa bit her lip. You will come to the Eyrie with us? I must return to my son, she said. Her hand drifted to Belly's slight swell. Rumor told the Vale she still nursed grief, yet secret letters from Maester Coleman hinted new child quickening, though early yet. Jon needs his mother near. She touched Ned's wrist. The High Hall will give hearing. My lord husband's memory commands respect still. Catelyn squeezed her sister's arm. Agreement sealed, they turned to provisions. Salted eel, oat bread, kegs of river wine, bale of arrows, vellum for fresh letters. Sansa would remain at Riverrun with septa and servants. Hoster insisted, fearing perilous mountain paths. Arya stamped but accepted departure. Desmond and Will would ride with Brynden's outriders. Jory and Catelyn would lead the main escort behind Ned and Howland. 2 days they rested, planning, mending tack, soothing horses' fetlocks. On the second morning, as mist burned off the river, Ned walked alone along the curtain wall. He tasted iron in the wind, a hint of rain yet unborn. Below, in the outer yard, Sansa practiced stitches with the septa while Arya sparred with a Blackwood squire twice her size, her small wooden blade flicking like a furious finch. Catelyn and Maester Vyman argued herb dosages, laughter underscoring worry. Footsteps behind. Brynden approached, cloak snapping. He offered Ned a wineskin. They drank in silence. Then the Blackfish murmured. Riders spotted a lone knight at Maidenpool Ferry, tall, silver hair, carrying a milky sword. He helped a fisherwife fight off cut purses, paid her with a ruby, then rode west along the salt road. Ned stared at river foam swirling below. Arthur, so it seems. If he skirts Harrenhal, he may reach us before we depart, or fall into Tywin's net. Brynden snorted. Lannister nets catch fat fish, not swift swords of legend. Ned's pulse quickened. If Arthur reunited, their cause gained a living symbol of the Kingsguard's purity, proof no simple treachery guided them. Yet Robert's wrath would double. Thunderheads breached the horizon that dusk, bruising the sky. Rain speckled parapets and drummed canvas shelters in the yard. As evening meal concluded, fresh trout, barley stew, tart cherries, sentries cried horns. A lone rider approached across the eastern span, bannerless, leading a second horse. In torchlit gloom, his armor glimmered silver white. Ned pushed from trestle bench and strode to the gatehouse. Guards parted. The rider dismounted within, cloak soaked to dark gray, hair plastered across cheekbones. He unbuckled the doeskin wrapping and drew forth dawn, its pale ghost light bathing mud in moonsheen.
Kneeling, ser Arthur Dayne laid blade af Nedes fed.
I have broken my chains, he said, voice raw. I will not let truth fight alone. Ned hauled him up. Rain spattered their cloaks, hissed on hot forge iron nearby. Brynden clasped Arthur's elbow and led him inside. Stable hands led the spare mount away. Ned glimpsed the horse's saddle pack bulging with scroll tubes, perhaps proof collected from sympathetic septons or Dornish chroniclers Arthur had passed. Inside the great hall, hush fell as the sword of the morning entered. Sansa gasped. Arya's eyes sparked star-bright. Hoster, propped on cushions, managed a wan smile. Arthur bowed low before the old lord. Starfall owes Riverrun a debt for succor offered its truth-bearers, he said, voice formal as a sept cantor. You owe the realm a living conscience, Hoster whispered. Sit, sare, and warm bones. They tended Arthur's wounds, fresh welts on ribs, cuts at wrists from manacles. Howland smeared swamp salve. Caitlin stitched a torn sleeve. Servants draped him in a dry cloak dyed the faint lavender of dusk in Dornish skies. Over hot cider he recounted his escape. Bribed jailer with silver rose, followed forgotten Ashford tunnel to the sewer, rode across the Blackwater under moonless bank, evaded Lannister scouts by slipping among small folk heading for harvest fairs. At Maidenpool he acquired horse and slit-vein proof of his own loyalty. A ring set with Rhaegar's sigil, entrusted by the prince's old squire, Miles Mutton's cousin. The city shivers, he said. Robert is hunting boar but also his ghosts. The Queen's brother Jaime meets secretly with the Gold Cloak's new captain. Bracken men told me near Duskendale, and Tywin readies Westerman. He produced scroll, a map carved with red lines along the Golden Road, showing 4,000 Lannister spears marching east to Harrenhal's charred crown. Ned splayed it on the trestle. Brynden cursed softly. Arthur's eyes met Ned's. We must outrun them to the Vale. Preparations accelerated. Rain hammered the courtyard all night, drowning hooves stamping as grooms packed feed bags in covered stalls. At breakfast, Hoster blessed the venture with shaky words. May the rivers guide your course, and may trout and wolf leap in concert. He pressed Brynden to lead 100 Tully lances, enough to deter brigands yet not provoke full host. Arthur would ride near the vanguard. Ned would carry the letter and testimony inside a bronze-bound chest slung behind his saddle. Caitlin bid Sansa farewell in chambers smelling of lavender and parchment. Tears brimmed but did not fall. Sansa hugged her father, promising to perfect her seat on a palfrey and keep songs alive in halls. Caitlin gave her a carved weirwood brooch shaped like a direwolf's head. Winter watches always, she said. Maester Vyman promised ravens each dawn. Before the dawn that mattered, Ned stooped by Bran's letters tucked inside his satchel. Childish sketches of knights and direwolves, to fortify resolve. Then torches slanted across the yard. The portcullis chain rattled. Riders filed out 2 and 2 under the Blackfish's standard of silver trout and the stark banner of gray direwolf on ice white. Arthur rode with cloak hood shadowing violet eyes. Jory and Wolf flanked Caitlin and Arya. Howland's pony drifted nimble along muddy verge. They crossed the green fork at dawn's first blush, dew trembling on river reeds. Brynden steered them east through rolling pastures where dairy cows lifted mild eyes at passing thunder of hooves. Villagers stared, unsure whether the banners presaged war or wedding. Ned noted stocks of grain already bound, harvest ahead of schedule, fear of conflict urging early reaping. By midday they crested a ridge from which the mountains of the moon loomed like blue wolves crouched upon the horizon. Thunderheads behind them still muttered over Riverrun, but ahead skies cleared, though the mountain wind carried serrated chill. Brynden turned north toward a sheep track leading into the foothills, aiming to bypass populated villages where ravens might flap news to Lannister ears. Farm lanes narrowed to rock-strewn switchbacks, pines crowding. The air tasted of sap and slate. On the second evening, they camped beneath towering gray-white pines near a tarn that mirrored stars. Arthur practiced slow sword forms with Dawn, a dance of ghostlight tracing arcs above the dark water. Arya watched, mimicking steps with Needle. Arthur paused, beckoned her closer, corrected her footing. A sword is a promise, little wolf. Keep your promise tight as lungs to breath. She nodded fiercely. Ned sat on a boulder, listening. Around him soldiers murmured of home. River wives sprinkling salt on loaves, northern hearths with bare fur rugs. Caitlin moved among them with kettle of stew, the simple act spinning thread of hearth in wilderness. Howland tended a wounded horse's hoof, murmuring first men chants beneath breath. The Blackfish walked the perimeter with 2 scouts. When darkness thickened, Ned rose, approached Arthur. The knight sheathed Dawn, wiping ghost steel with oilcloth. Your wrist heals, Ned asked. Pain reminds the heart of beat, Arthur said. Better than numb. They paced along the water's edge. Ned spoke low. "You know Robert will not yield crown. Even if Septon Willem had lived, the king would fear the realm's mockery." "I do not seek Robert's crown," Arthur returned. "Only that the child be named legitimate, free of shame." Ned's breath frosted in the chilled air. "Naming him may spur rebellion for throne anyway. Some will rally behind a dragon heir. Then our cause must be to temper dragons with wolves. Raise him in North's honor, not conquest." Ned's gaze lifted to stars. "John has known only cairn of secrecy. Revelations may burden him beyond measure." Arthur halted. "Truth cuts, yes, but lies fester. Our fathers' built kingdoms on truth stone. We must repair cracks." Ned nodded, though dread coiled like ice worm in his gut. They rode at dawn, pushing hard. In the foothill gloom they spied smoke rising ahead, silt-gray coil above pines. Scouts galloped back. A Burnty village near the high pass. Riders in crimson cloaks sighted. Lannister outriders ranged this far. Brynden ordered quick march. They skirted charred cottages, children's toys scattered in ash. The smell of scorched goat meat and pine pitched in their nostrils. A lone dog whined near a corpse. Arya tried to feed it bacon, but it fled. The blackened silence weighed heavy as a mailed fist. Ned clenched reins. Tywin's scorched earth lessons from the end of Robert's rebellion seemed alive again, warning all who sheltered wolves. Catelyn whispered prayers. Arthur's jaw hardened. That evening storms rolled down from the peaks, spitting hail. They took shelter in a disused holdfast carved half into a cliff. Its stone walls still bore Alice Arryn's falcon sigils weathered by centuries. Inside the great cavernous hall, moldering rushes crunched under boots. An ancient hearth gaped, cold as tomb. They stoked fire from pine logs hauled in. Sparks danced on columns carved like talons. As Arya and Catelyn unrolled blankets near the fire, Ned and Brynden studied map corners by lantern. The Bloody Gate lay 2 hard days' ride beyond the pass, but scouts reported avalanche debris blocking the main mule track. A narrower smuggler's trail skirted cliffs. Riskier, but quicker. Arthur volunteered to reconnoiter with 2 scouts at first light. Ned protested, but Arthur smiled wryly. A sword of dawn finds paths before others stir. That night wind moaned through arrow slits, carrying scents of snow though it was only late summer. Ned dreamed of Lyanna running across Winterfell's bailey, petals of blue roses flurrying behind. She turned to call, but her mouth spilled blood-sick words. "Protect him, Ned, the child of summer." Then the petals blackened, turned to raven feathers and scattered. He woke before dawn, heart hammering. Outside, the world glowed pearl gray. Arthur already gone. They packed and rode. By midday scouts flashed sign from a ridge. Safe passage found along goat paths hugging cliffs. They turned onto the thread of track hugging mountainside. Below, mist veiled a chasm so deep its bottom looked like fathomless night. Arya stared wide but did not flinch. Catelyn's lips moved in silent prayer. Horses skittered, but Will's low whistles soothed them. Halfway across, Ned's mount shied. Hoof dislodged a stone that tumbled, echoing forever. He steadied the gelding, murmuring. Wind gusted, claws of air clutching cloaks. Arthur rode ahead, scanning sky. Suddenly his hand shot up, halt. A roar echoed between peaks, a war horn bending in mountain bowl. From crag above, Lannister arrows slashed downward like hawks diving. One struck Jory's shield rim, splintering. Another thunked into Brynden's thigh plate, glancing. Ambush. Dozens of men in red and gold surcoats emerged atop ridge, crossbows braced on stone. A voice boomed, "In the name of King Robert, yield Lord Stark and the traitor Dayne." Arthur spurred forward along switchback until he reached a rocky shelf wide enough for 3 horses. He drew dawn. Its pale light flashed. The Lannister captain barked order. Crossbows twanged. Arthur moved, the blade a blur, striking bolts from sky, each crack a spark against ghost steel. Ned's throat clenched. Mortal men could not fell such volley. Brynden's archers loosed uphill. Shafts arced, some disappearing, some finding joints between mail. Ned dismounted, dragged Arya and Catelyn behind a jutting boulder. Jory rallied spearmen, shields raised. Arrows whistled. One pierced Desmond's upper arm. He grunted but stayed standing. Arthur advanced, each stride sure despite crumbling gravel. Lannister line faltered at spectral gleam. Then chaos. A rumble shook earth. Figures on ridge cried as ground beneath them rippled. Rockslide thundered. Tons of shale loosened by bygone rain gave way. Crossbowmen shrieked, tumbling into void. Dust geysered. Silence returned save for distant clatter of stones settling in ravine's throat. When air cleared, only 3 Lannister survivors clung to root snag almost level with Ned's trail. Arthur called for rope. Bryndon's men hauled them up, disarmed. The captain, gaunt, bleeding, spat at Arthur's boots but said nothing. How knew they our path? Ned asked Brynden, voice low. The Blackfish's dark gaze returned. A raven left Riverrun night we departed. We have a mole. Ned felt heat in cheeks, anger or embarrassment. He glanced to Arthur. Dust white across hair, violet eyes like dawn after storm. We must move faster. By twilight, they reached a meadow perched beneath the first sentinel towers of the Vale. The trail joined the stone-paved high road, now patrolled by errand men in sky-blue cloaks. Trumpets hailed their arrival. At the bloody gate, 2 titans of stone carved like winged falcons. They found banners of falcon and moon flapping above ramparts. Ser Donnell Waynwood emerged, helm under arm. Lord Stark, Lady Stark, he greeted, eyes widening at Arthur's presence but swallowing commentary. Coils of parchment already in his fist. Lysa's orders. Escort all to the Eyrie with utmost speed, with 10 knights of the Vale to reinforce. Decorative debates about traitors or truth would wait inside impregnable heights. Rest came brief. Fresh horses, oatcakes, waterskins. The moon silvered the mountain roofs as they began the climb of the Giant's Lance along the narrow stony road known as the Eyrie Spine. Crickets chirped, distant wolves howled. Stars brightened, and Catelyn pointed out the sword of the morning star, to which Arthur smiled faintly. The mule cages awaited at Skystair. Arya pressed nose to iron bars, fascinated as cage creaked upward into mist. In shifts they ascended. Ned's turn came last. He rode with Arthur, the cage swaying like an unblinking pendulum over leagues of nothing. Wind sliced, rattling chain links. Snow began to drift, though summer reigned below. Midnight rolled its cloak when the cage docked at Eyre's landing. White marble towers soared, moonlit. Guards led them across frost-kissed courtyard, torches guttering. Lysa met them in the high hall, Jon Arryn's slender bronze seat unoccupied save by memory. Behind her stood Boy Lord Robert Arryn, pale and wide-eyed, hugging Dol Falcon with one hand while the other shook uncontrollably. "Welcome," Lysa announced, voice echoing off ice-veined pillars. She opened arms, though tension pulled her shoulders. Here, truth roosts safe from lions.
Ned bowed, exhaustion weighing like slag.
May it prove fortress enough. Arthur scanned hall, then unslung a heavy satchel. He laid scrolls on the map table, copies of Lyanna's letter, Willem's testimony, sworn statements from Septons in Dorne, a diary kept by Rhaegar's squire noting betrothal annulment with Elia Martell. Lysa's maester, Coleman, adjusted spectacles, eyes gleaming at treasures. Time blurred into hours as scribes duplicated documents. Witnesses attested, seals impressed. In the hours before dawn, Ned, Catelyn, Arthur, Brynden, and Lysa stood around a brazier whose coals painted red their weary faces. "The Lord's declarant will convene tomorrow," Lysa said. "They will hear each testimony and inscribe into the Vale's court annals. Once recorded, any attempt by the crown to quash will ring treasonous even to cautious houses." Ned ran fingers through damp hair. "It will not stop Tywin. It may stay Robert's hand," Arthur countered, "and rouse others who fear uncontrolled lion rise." Brynden added, "The Riverlands stir. Once this truth seeps, Blackwoods, Mallisters, maybe even Brackens will choose side. Sir Donnell Waynwood spoke from doorway. Ravens arrived while you rose. Stannis Baratheon marches from Dragonstone with 400 knights and speech railing against the false council of Lannisters. He demands audience with Robert in open court. Eyes met. Hope flickered like brazier flame. If Stannis pressed law to Robert's face, the king might reevaluate. Yet Howland's quiet voice reminded caution. Between lions cornered and stags enraged, truth may still break.
Ned nodded.
But we have at least given it armor. Outside, dawn's first blade of rose cut the eastern horizon. Light spilled through tall arched windows, gilding marble floor. Lisa's banner of falcon and crescent caught it, shimmering. Ned stepped to the balcony overlooking a sea of clouds far below. Wind tasted of distant pine and ice. He thought of Winterfell cloaked in summer gloom, of Jon's unknowing eyes, of Sansa threading songs for hearth, of Arya asleep curled with needle. Somewhere far south, Robert stalked boar in a forest, perhaps sensing the turning tides though not the shape. Catelyn joined him, hand slipping into his. Arthur stood behind, dawn resting tip on marble, ghosts of morning sparking along its edge. The blackfish leaned on balustrade, scanning sky as if for incoming ravens. Howland hummed low verse older than the Undulls. In that fragile hush, Ned realized the realm's breath held hinge-tight between heartbreak and renewal. The next days would see it shatter or strengthen, but for this heartbeat, they all stood on stone carved by hands trusting sky more than earth, a place where even storms bowed below. He inhaled the thin, biting air and exhaled, letting hope knit to determination. Winter's action was not a single clash of swords, but a relentless thaw of falsehood by tireless truth. And the thaw had begun. Behind him, the Lord's declarance bells tolled 3 times, summoning the council. Papers rustled, steel scraped scabbards, boots rang across marble. Ned turned, meeting Arthur's steady gaze, then Catelyn's fierce blue eyes. Together, they walked toward the hall where justice waited, each step echoing like the first hammer strike forging a new blade for a realm drunk too long on tales told wrong.